Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Unboxed. I'm your host AJ, and I have with me Jamilia Grier. I hope I've got that right. She's the founder of ByteBao and the host of the podcast Barely Legal in Web3. I'll come back to that. I want to talk to you about the names. Based in Dubai, and she's a graduate of the University of Connecticut School of Law. Jamilia is passionate about Web3 technologies and empowering businesses in the digital realm. She's also a keynote speaker known for her deep engagement in authentic storytelling. Welcome, Jamilia.
Thank you for having me, AJ.
All right. I'm quite excited to talk to you about a lot of things because you're our first Web3 expert on the show. And there's so many things I want to talk about, and technology is something that I deeply care about and I really often talk about. But before we get into all that, I just want to understand your journey, from being a law graduate and setting up startups and getting into the Web3 space. I just want to understand your journey, if you could just start by that.
Sure. Well, I think I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I don't think I had the guts to do it for a long time, to really go into it. During law school, I had a startup which was helping U.S. businesses source goods from China. And so at that time, Alibaba, the popular Chinese company, was very new.
Yes.
And the United States was looking at it eagerly, and many Americans wanted to use it, but they didn't trust quality. And they didn't trust the manufacturers. And so what my role was in that was to connect them with suppliers, negotiate with the suppliers in China, and set up all the terms of the transaction. And that's where I really got a lot of my business Chinese. I had spent time in China before, but that's when it really picked up. And I did that. It was really great, but I was in law school, and part of me still wanted to be a lawyer. I hadn't given up on that just yet. And so I decided, let's put this business down and let's continue on and take up a job in a firm. And that's exactly what I did. And so my life has really been this journey of wanting to do entrepreneurial things, but not really having the guts or the courage to do it until very recently.
All right. Okay. What was the reason for that change?
I think I realized that technology is evolving. It's not going to stop. And now is my time. And if I don't take action now, then the opportunity would pass me by.
Yes, absolutely. And it's quite interesting to know that, you're following your passion and you're using what you've learned, your skill set in business, and that's really amazing. From a branding perspective, because I work with brands, what caught my attention, a couple of things that caught my attention, but I'll start with the names. Now, you operate a business called ByteBao, that is BYTE, Bao, and as well as you host the podcast, Barely Legal in Web3. Now, in the branding space, naming is incredibly important, and I feel that, when I came across these names, I find that it's kind of unique. What was your thought process behind, coming up with this? It's not very corporate. It's kind of fun. It's kind of, approachable. It's kind of different. It's memorable. So what was your thought process when you came up with these names?
Sure. Well, ByteBao, I mentioned I have a background in China and I speak Chinese. And so
you speak Chinese?
I do. And so in the Chinese language, in Mandarin, there is a term called 保护, which means to protect. And so coming from this data privacy background, I thought, well, B, right? It's the same letter as with byte, and so the term actually means to protect data. And so when I initially started the company, I really thought I would just do consulting for data privacy and data security work. And that was really the intent before I started getting into the blockchain side. And so that's the origins of ByteBao. Now you can see it full on.
So it's always interesting to learn the story, understand the story behind the name, because again, there's a thinking involved. It's not just a random name that sounds good, and that really makes a difference. It's a conversation starter. It makes sense, when you put things together, and that's really interesting. I don't know if you, I know you're in the technology space, and for a lot of our listeners, they really don't know the clear differentiation between Web3, what is Web3, what is Web1, what is Web2, how are they different? In your words, I mean, there are a lot of explanations out there. In your view, what is Web3 and how is it different from Web1 and Web2?
Sure. Well, when we look at Web 1, we think about really a internet that you can go on and you can read information. So you can access the information, you can see it and view it, but you can't really contribute to it.
Yes.
And so those were the early stages
Netscape,
of internet.
dial-up modems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, you say Netscape and so many memories come back. I had the dial-up and all of that.
Yeah.
And then the internet progressed to this phase of Web 2, which is really where we're mainly at now, where you can read and write.
Right.
So you can read and contribute to the information. And you see that through forums and blogs, and so you are co-creating in this.
Yes.
But you don't really own it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you create a blog now and it's resting somewhere and that data is somewhere, but at any given moment, it can be taken away, it can be erased.
Yes.
And then that value is gone.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Web3, we're talking about a system where you can read, write, and own the information.
Okay.
And it's a little bit misleading, actually, when I think about the term of owning, because really it is jointly owned. It is owned and yet not owned by anyone, because once it's created, it is out there on the blockchain, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I would even kind of challenge that idea of read, write, own. It's really no one is owning it, but it exists, and we are maybe co-owning it jointly as a cooperative.
Yeah, probably more controls. I think blockchain and I from what I understand, it's also about immersive experiences, and I think in 2022 there was a big Web3 was a big in thing. Facebook was rebranding to Meta, and everybody was talking about NFTs and the crypto boom. And then suddenly in 2023, OpenAI came up with ChatGPT, and the whole shift in conversation and attention was on AI. And is AI a part of Web3, or how do you see that?
I like to see it as part of Web3 because the logistics of it is that we are contributing data, information, ways for this language model to learn, and yet who really owns it, right? So we are contributing, we are writing in a way. Every time you ask ChatGPT a question and it tells you something you don't like and you say, no, what I mean is this, you are teaching it.
Yes.
You are teaching it, you are contributing. So that is part of the writing piece.
True.
And then the ownership piece, it gets a little murky, right? And there are some things that have happened in the news recently to indicate that not everyone is comfortable with who owns it, because if it is located in the cloud and wherever it's located, we're not really sure about the ownership piece. So I like to include AI into that conversation of Web3.
Yeah. And coming to that conversation about cloud, and my recent previous guest was an expert on cloud computing. And coming back to our discussion, Apple recently concluded its WWDC keynote 2 days back, I think on Monday. And one of the key announcements was the AI, or Apple Intelligence as they call it. Apple has been incredibly careful about how they address privacy. They always talk about on-device computing, and that's the reason why they came up with the latest M3, M series chips. They want to do computing on device. But there was a shift in the recent keynote when they announced Apple Intelligence, that they will be for devices that cannot compute, don't have the computing power. They're going to use cloud computing. They call it private cloud computing with security protocols, but at the end of the day, it's cloud. You're sending data back and forth the cloud. So I think this is something that we really have to understand, right? Our data is out there. It's on the cloud. How incredibly important is data on the cloud as a user, from a user standpoint, And also because you're in the legal space as a business, what are the implications of my data being on the cloud? What are the security risks? And how can I protect myself? So there are a lot of questions I just want to do.
You know, I think it's important to distinguish legal and ethical obligations.
Yes.
There are many things that Apple does to remain compliant, meaning that it's abiding by the law.
Yeah.
It's abiding by either the California Privacy Act or GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations of the EU. In any country it operates, it will follow the law. But the problem is that we don't really have full visibility as to the long-term consequences of how this is going to impact society.
Exactly.
So there is a gray area where it is, at this point, at this day and time, Apple is determining what it will and will not do based upon what? Potentially its morals or its understanding of what its legal obligations could be. And that's a very gray spectrum. Right? So if for example, if I say, okay, AJ, you can go to the buffet, but just eat a little, right? So what is a little, right? What is a little? Does that mean you're going to take one plate of fruit or you're going to have one plate of something that's unhealthy? And so we need to be really careful in kind of giving Apple a pass when it says we're doing everything that we can to protect your data. That's a very vague statement, right? And of course, Apple has huge privacy teams. They have data protection lawyers, and they are spending money on it for sure. But the question is that, you know, in a corporation where your objective is to maximize profits, your objective is not to protect user data. So if I have to decide between maximizing shareholder value or protecting AJ's private information, I'm going to maximize shareholder value. And that is this moral dilemma that we're in right now, is that now technology is at the point where it is going to have a real impact on our lives. And just to kind of piggyback on this, you know, give you sort of a dystopian analogy of this. There's a show on Netflix called Black Mirror, and this show talks about what would life be like if technology were a certain way in some episodes. And there's one episode where Netflix, they're using Netflix as an example, can actually create content based upon your life. So they're able to see into your life, and so when you turn on Netflix, you see a show about AJ interviewing Jamilia.
Oh, really?
But the show is happening after it has happened in real life, right? And so that came out maybe like a year or so ago, and people were like, wow, that's crazy. But now Netflix is announcing, actually, we do have capability, and we are looking to create content and shows based upon what we know about you. Because you'll like it more. Let's face it, right? You're not going to want to watch a show that you don't like. So the question becomes that, you know, if a company can do something, should it do that thing? And I think that's exactly the arena that we're in right now with Apple and AI, is that yes, you know, you could potentially store it in the cloud off of devices, but what does that mean in terms of security?
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I mean, you being in the law, from law background, how do you see this playing out? How can you protect? How can we protect ourselves from in the potential case of, you know, breach of data, or, you know, and I forgot what I was about to ask. But if you could just start by that, I'll get the follow-up question. I really had something really important to ask you, but then
sure. Well, maybe this will, you know. I think that there are things that individuals can do, and of course we all know those things about 2FA and authentication and, you know, being aware of scams, etc. But the reality is that no data is safe, and we've even learned that protocols and information on the blockchain can be vulnerable. So unfortunately, you can do the best that you can do, but in this day and age where you basically need to use digital banking, you need to use your computer, you need to access the GPS to know where to go. I don't see a situation, unless for a very extreme situation, where any individual can pull themselves 100% totally out of this data-driven lifestyle that we live in.
You being in the technology space and following what's happening in AI, there's an quite an interesting take on things, because when I've noticed a lot of people talking online on YouTube that AI is coming, robots are going to help us wash the dishes and so we can relax. But do you ever imagine a scenario where the robots are relaxing and we are washing the dishes for them? The robots taking over the...
It's a very interesting idea.
Yeah.
Because everything evolves in a progression.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can think about messaging. How do we communicate? Well, first we were communicating with grunts, and then we're writing on cave walls.
Yeah.
And then we're putting messages in pigeons for them to send them.
Yeah.
And then we're doing snail mail letters,
Yes.
and then emails, and now it's text, and
Yes.
it's going to continue to evolve.
Yes.
If we get to a point where AI, we are dependent and reliant upon it. And I think we're already getting to that piece. I mean, I can tell you as a business owner, I don't see much of a need to hire a copywriter anymore. Because AI is just that good. It takes me, it knows what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can review it very quickly and say, change this, and it will come back and give me exactly what I need, and it's good enough.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a cost savings.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So if someone were to take that away from me, I would, it would be detrimental. It would be bad. So I could see an evolution where we get to the point that we are so reliant upon AI that our lives are changed for sure.
This is just offhand. Like I keep thinking about a scenario where we become so dependent on technology. I had a technology expert on the show, and he was telling me that now it's moving from coding to low code to no code, where we can get things done using AI without any code. So what happens in a situation where there's a nuclear something and we are all we lose half of the technology that we have? We'll be in a situation where we'll have to start from scratch, reinventing the wheel. We don't know how to do things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite... So how do you view the I'm a person who really believes in embracing technology rather than getting scared of it and then running away, or just go with the flow, ride the wave, and learn and empower yourself and move forward. In your view, how do you, I know that a lot of people are scared about what's happening, the rapid evolution of technology, AI coming into the picture. What is your take on that, and where do you think we are heading?
I also love technology, I really do. And I think it can be used for great things for society. But I don't think we're at the point at this time where companies are completely responsible for their innovations. And what does that mean? That means that when I create something, I'm not just thinking about my bottom line. I'm not just thinking about my target audience or consumer. I'm thinking about the impact to society. It is the Oppenheimer dilemma, right? Yeah. And so we have great capability to be able to teach a GPT anything. I can create a GPT copywriter, and it knows my business, and it can run anything. But we are not thinking long term. We are simply not. And so there is this huge dilemma that companies need to really think about. And I don't think companies are doing that. I think this whole race to AI and quite frankly, the way the markets are reacting with NVIDIA, for example, there's so much hot money and incentives for people to chase it. We do not have enough incentive to stop and say, what are we doing?
Exactly. I think that shows the reason. If you look at companies like Apple, they were actually against using the word AI in any of their communication marketing, and they're forced now to use AI. And I think they said it around 60 times in the previous keynote. Where previously they never used it. They were using machine learning or some other jargon. So essentially, it shows how companies have. You either use it or you get left out. right? And because of that, they overtook Microsoft in company valuation. Microsoft was there on the top. Second was Apple. Because of the new announcements, for a brief period of time, Apple overtook Microsoft. So you can see the power of how much money is there. I want to come back to one of the first things I saw when I landed on your website, ByteBao, is you started off the web page with your purpose and mission. And very few companies do that because it's about us, the usual, what we do and our services, and I felt that it was quite interesting to see that take. And you empower lawyers and to embrace or empower them with Web3 knowledge. So, how did you end up in this space? Because for me, because I'm not in that space, it's quite new. I'm hearing it for the first time. But is it something? Is it a very unique field? And what exactly are you doing at ByteBao?
Sure. No one's ever asked me that question, and I'm actually thinking of it as you ask it. I think my career path has been a bit untraditional because as a technology and data lawyer, what do you actually do? My career started off, my first sort of tech lawyer job was working at a company that was then called United Technologies. It's now called Raytheon Technologies, and they're in the aerospace and defense. And I came in right after they had received a major fine from the U.S. government for selling military sensitive technology to China. And so my role, I came into the office in Connecticut for the interview, and the counsel looked at me and he said, I know you're here for a job in Connecticut, but we want you to go back to China because you speak Chinese and you'd be great for this. And so that was my first mission, so to speak, is to protect U.S. data from entering China, but be on the ground in China and make sure that this data doesn't enter the military side. And so a very interesting part of that, and many U.S. aerospace and defense companies have joint ventures with Chinese companies that have a commercial side and a military side. So can you imagine the difficulty in the same building, right? And this is the same dilemma that TikTok is facing now, is they say, yes, we have a Chinese side and we have a U.S. side, and we're going to split it, and no one will see what's on the other side. There will be a wall of it. It doesn't really happen that way, right? It's really impractical.
Exactly.
And so that started this theme of technology and data has more value than just the data itself. It's actually power. It's power to governments, it's power to companies, and it can be used for all sorts of purposes. And so that was very interesting to me. I've always been interested in international affairs and international events. And then so every role I had after that had to do with China and potentially, protecting data. I was at Marriott when the data leak of passports. I think like 1.3 or 3 million passport numbers were leaked and on the black web, and I had to go in and talk to the Chinese PSB, the Police Security Bureau, about that. Very exciting times.
Very exciting.
Very exciting times. But the point of all this is that lawyers, sometimes they're in court, sometimes they're helping companies draft policies, but sometimes they're just cleaning up messes. We do a lot of things in-house, like investigations and audits, and it's pretty fun stuff, but no one ever gets to see it because they shouldn't see it, right? If you're a lawyer and you're doing this stuff and someone finds out, you're doing it wrong. Your job is to keep things confidential and to work for the company, but all of this stuff has already come out. That's why I can speak about it. And so that's the role of a technology and data lawyer, is to make sure that all of the data that the company collects, that it's protected, that they're not misusing it, and to really be an advocate on behalf of consumers, but be in the company. That's how I view the role. I've found that over the years, many lawyers are not really advocates. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to sort of risk their career or their job or their livelihood by going against the grain. Not to say that I was ever in that situation, but the reason that I came out of the corporate world is so I could speak up. Is because I think there's a lot of great innovation that needs lawyers that understand these nuances. And in law school, we're not taught about technology or data.
Yeah.
We're taught contracts, criminal law. We're taught cases from 17 and 1800s that are totally irrelevant today.
Yeah.
And that's what they give us as weapons of knowledge to go out and fight on the blockchain. We don't need to know about...
So you really need to empower these
Yeah.
people with the right kind of tools and arm them with the right knowledge.
Yeah.
I think, quite interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a whole new realm for me to understand, and it's quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It's interesting that you use the word armed, because I
Yeah.
do look at it as an army of lawyers.
Yeah.
I think it really is people who are brave,
Yes.
people who want to do something different,
Yes.
and they realize the impact to society that they'll have by helping these companies help themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Being a lawyer, working in this space, in this industry, and looking at what's happening out there, a lot of brands, they talk about, they take the data, they make us sign, the security checklist. They take our data. How do you think? I mean, just to rephrase that, are companies really serious about what they say outside in the press, that we keep your data secure, we are really serious about this? Is it just PR, or are companies really serious about that in your opinion?
I think some companies are very serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually those companies are B Corps.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the companies that have greater social missions
Mm-hmm.
than just maximizing shareholder value and revenue. But there's such a spectrum on that, and you would probably be shocked to find that sometimes when lawyers are put into these roles, they themselves don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, and that's also a risk. And so there are so many nuances to it. You can have lawyers that are too junior, lawyers that are coming from different fields, lawyers that don't see themselves as compliance people, and at the end of the day, you get a product that may not be safe, or it may not be ready for market. That's a huge risk. I do find that most companies are putting dollars behind it, but the question is, and that's why you need an investigator, is are those dollars effective? You spent $5 million on a great compliance team to make sure that data is safe, and you've hired a CISO, and is it working?
Yeah. Jamilia, now just looking at your entrepreneurial journey, like I know you've set up a couple of companies, you've learned a lot, and I want to understand, people usually talk about the success they've had. I want to talk about what kind of failures did you have along the way? What did you learn from them?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
My biggest challenge along the way has been not listening to my gut.
All right. Okay.
And doing what other people would like for me to do.
Okay.
When I had that startup in law school, working for the U.S. companies trying to source goods from China, I had actually a call from Schindler Elevator, one of the largest elevator companies in the world.
Yeah.
And because I was not confident that I could fulfill their order, I passed on it.
Oh. Wow.
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, it's a big
I
miss.
passed on it. And they were chasing me. They were like, please, we know there's this I'll never forget it. There's a microfab material in China for elevator floors. We need you to do this. Can you fulfill it? I had law school exams. I was a new mom. I had so much going on in my life, and this is not, I'm sorry, but it's not for me. So go find a real company.
Yeah.
And so there was always this sort of doubt that I could actually do it, and that has been my biggest failure so far. Until finally I just said, you know what? I'm going to believe that I can actually do it. And it's funny because once you start doing the thing, you can reaffirm your confidence. Because every step you make, as you're honest with yourself and you're consistent with yourself, you become more confident.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah. The reason why I asked you is essentially, I think there's a lot of a lot to take away and unpack from what you said. Be brave, and that's one of the. I mean, when I was starting off, I had the same issues as I was not quite confident, because not everybody is from that risk from that risk taking background. They're very calculative. They just see if it's going to work or not, and a lot of things, and we don't have the experience and the knowledge to actually gauge if it's going to work or not. So I think so what is your advice for budding entrepreneurs who are thinking, who are on the edge, thinking, should I take the leap forward, or just wait for a couple of years and just earn some money working somewhere? And what do you think?
I think there's this pressure to just jump right in. I don't think people need to quit their jobs tomorrow and jump right in.
Yeah.
But I do think you need to do something. You've got to take some kind of step, even if it's writing articles or speaking at conferences or just becoming a subject matter expert in that what you want to do. Learn how to create a website. You have to start. Because if you don't start, you won't do it. And so I think people need to be honest with themselves and put a plan in place and move towards that goal, rather than saying, oh, it's not the right time now. It's never going to be the right time.
Exactly.
It's never the right time.
Exactly.
You know that, right?
Exactly. There's never the right time. Yeah, absolutely. You're a mom, right? And you're incredibly busy. You have businesses that you run, you create content. How do you balance everything? What is your secret sauce to making sure that you're everywhere at the same time and giving focus and attention to everything that matters?
I think it's grace,
Yeah.
because I don't balance it all. I really don't.
Right.
I have days where I am tapped out on the business and not responding to Slack messages or emails, and maybe there's some people now that are listening like, yeah, she never got back to me. So the ball drops. Yeah.
Now they know.
Now they know why. And then same on the home front. Maybe I don't cook dinner, or something is dirty or messy around the house. But I give myself grace to just say, you're not perfect. It's okay. And I think as women, for sure, we have these ideals in our mind. What does it mean to be the perfect wife?
Exactly.
What does it mean to be the perfect mother? There's so much pressure in society to look a certain way or perform a certain way. Just forget all of that. You've got to let it go. And it is a journey. That's probably even the more hard process than starting the business, is that internal process of accepting that it's not going to be perfect.
Nice. One last question. You've traveled a lot. You said you speak Chinese. How did that come about?
Yeah. So I actually in undergrad, my junior year, I was very interested in international economics. So my master's and my bachelor's are in economics. And I had a professor who was teaching international finance, and he used to subscribe to Financial Times, and he held up the paper and he said, if someone's looking for a great career in the next 20 years, look at China. And I don't know, for whatever reason, those words stuck with me.
Wow.
And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, there was a flyer in the hallway that said, teach English in China for free.
Wow.
For the summer.
Okay.
I took advantage of that opportunity, and the rest is history. I just allowed it to kind of build on that. My first trip to China back in 2000, I loved it.
Really?
It was totally different then than it is now. It was still developing. There was still a lot of mystique around China, and mystique around foreigners, quite frankly, particularly as a black woman going to China in 2000. And that just sort of set the tone. And I told myself after that trip, no matter what I do, it's got to be touching China. And so who knows, ByteBao may return to the Chinese market one day, expand there in some way.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Jamilia, I have a lot more questions to ask you, but I think we will conclude for now. It was really interesting. Everything that you said was quite insightful, interesting, and I took away a lot from our conversation today. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time, and I hope we can have you again in one of the future episodes.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's it. That's the end of the show for today. Please follow us, subscribe on all the social platforms, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.